If you want to fight all day long and learn your techniques and your practical application, then you no need to do forms. The first standard Mantis form, Saam Bo Jin, is to develop all your joints, ligaments. So, you know, there are some Qigong sets which are useful, if you can call them forms. But then there's the classical kind of martial arts forms you see like in Wushu. And these forms, people do them as fast as possible, do backflips. You can say it's like acrobatic. But you should do your forms, if you are doing forms, because you will be training on your own, probably most of the time, you know. But if you do your forms, you should see the application of every technique you're doing. And you should only do a form as fast as you see the application. So if you went, bah, 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 you didn't see any application. If you're doing it for a demonstration, you do it as fast as possible, because one way or the other, it doesn't matter. But when you're training on yourself, you should see the application of every technique you're doing. And when you see the application of every technique, when you do it on a person, you can see that put back in the form and vice versa, back away from the form. Does that make sense? So if you do a form and there's no application to it, then it's a waste of time. I can't see the point of you doing this and that. You might say, oh, it's for stretching your limbs or this and that, but you can do that anyway. But you should see the application of every technique you do in the form. That's very important. Okay, so obviously when you first start, you expand. Then you come down, and this is called, in Hakka, Mutto. Mutto means to wash down. And that's the first 8 movements, is to dip wakung. So you learn to close your ribs. Then you open up your chest, hoi hong, tang hong. This helps you to bring your shoulders back and forth like this, because people think that praying mantis only have their hands here. It wouldn't work in a fight. You can't just have your hands here. You have to bring it back. You have to. So anyways, this opening up your chest, you close your chest, you close your ribs. Then you come down. This next is beggar hand technique, Tam Jiao, Sau Bill. When you do Sau Bill, Bill Sau, you float. So you expand your body. And when you expand your body, you start closing. Each finger, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Bringing your elbow in first, because the first rule is that your first defense and in your second defense. So if something passes here, then you have your next defense. So the first 8 movements of the Saam Bo Jin, found in say 30 or 40% of the forms, the first 8 movements, contains dip wakung. It contains your releasing techniques, your closing techniques. So that's the importance of the Saam Bo Jin. So all these movements is to train the ribs, the back, the shoulder, the chest, and your backside, because you have to pull your backside up, you have to grip, toes on the floor. So you're training your, what is known as the digits, the fingers. So that's the importance of first form. And dip wakung, floating, sink, swallow, spit. No, you're power building, at the same time you're learning the exact movements and how to use them with your body in conjunction with your ribs. So when you punch, you don't just go like this, you punch with your ribs closing. Rather similar to, say, when you're doing Yu-Kill, you close. So all these maneuvers are there to train the body to develop it, making sure that whether you achieve it or not, but everything is behind it. The 9 parts, you know. You heard of the 24 principles, and then those principles teaching you that when you're doing this particular movement, all the parts of the body are interacted with each other. So that's what the first 8 movements teach you. But I say, if you're not prepared to look at your weaknesses, then how can you improve? You know, it's all right saying, as I said before, you know, oh, I'm never going to go down. This is never going to happen. That's only blind training. You must know your weaknesses, because you're only as strong as your weakest link. So that's very important. I like to see that. I always visualise Grand Master and how he does things and how I saw him. And I think one other thing about Grand Master Ip Sui, sometimes he doesn't teach people unless you ask him the right question. Sometimes, like, if you're not, because his method was sometimes, if you don't ask a question, you're not ready for it. But you have to ask the questions, and I've always done that to the early time. How would you use that? What about this? What about this? How would you do that? Then he gives the answer. But if you're not prepared to say, what would happen? What would this happen? You know? It's like Pong Long Ge. How many people do Pong Long Ge? Very few. And they say, oh, well, it doesn't belong into the system. Well, who's lying here? Are you denying or are you lying? Denying is different. Denying is like, oh, it doesn't belong, or it's not there. You can't deny. When you're doing martial arts, you must understand, as I said, all three things, like throwing, grappling, and punching and kicking. So, yeah. So when Grand Master, I always ask him, Qigong, what is this? What is that? What if I moved here? What if I moved there? Okay, you try. So just like a Hall of Light steps. I'll explain. Well, it doesn't matter, but the original Mantis system is the one that had the application. You know? So that's the bottom line. I mean, if there's no application, it's not original. How can it be original? Why would a person develop a warlike martial art ready to go in battle, but the techniques don't work? Huh? What would you do? I'm going to teach you this. It's traditional, but the techniques, they don't work. No, that's not possible. They must have worked at that particular time. You know? So, so the one with the application of all the manoeuvres is the traditional one. Yeah, sure. Okay, you have the first one called Mangguan, 5-element pole form. And the reason why it's called 5-element, I mean, there's two reasons why. One is Hai is metal. Actually, Hai, long time ago in China, Hai was spirit, but then they changed it to Dam, gold. And then later, gold became metal. Okay, so Hai is metal. Attacking is fire. Earth is diagonal down, earth. Water is low, and wood is block. That's it. So then you have 5-element, and it contains all these manoeuvres. But the other reason why it's called 5 elements, because when you do the pole form, I'll explain as well as we do this. When you come to the finishing it, instead of finish it, you can carry on. Does that make sense? So when you do the first got, you know, you do it also got on the other side. But you can carry on doing it. So the 5 elements is continuous, like this. And you just keep on going and going and going. You don't have to stop until the last bit, then you stop. That's why it's called 5-element pole form. Second one, Duk Se one. Another thing about sort of like learning different styles, I mean, Grand Master also said this, but he said this in a coy way, because I asked him again about this and he said, oh, it's not true, but then one day he could tell me it actually is true. That Lau Soi actually learned some other techniques from different people as well over the years. So that's another story. Anyway, the next one is called Duk Se Guan. Duk Se Guan is all facing front and diagonal, and it's to do with thrusting a lot, you know, just in and out. The third one, Bo Xin Guan. Bo Xin Guan teaches you to strike the points and more lateral movements where you're going left and right and attacking multiple people. And then you have Lau Soi Guan. Lau Soi Guan is, some say it's a variation of Lau Soi's own ideas. Okay? And then last but not least, Wong Nao Jin Joi Guan, which is yellow cow twisting tongue. And that pole form, and I'll be honest with you today, so anybody who says they know the complete form is not true, because Grand Master only knew a small part of it. The Lau Soi died before he could teach him all of it. So there's only circular motions on the floor. jagged edges movements, you know, for Wong Nao Jin Joi Guan. So they're the pole forms. Oh yeah. Tijek, iron ruler, butterfly knives. They weren't butterfly knives in the beginning, they were axe. Okay, then you have the pa, you know the pa? Yeah. And then you have the dao, the curved sword, and the gim. Yao Long Gim or Joy Fung Gim, there's another name for it. And you have fighting pole forms, Tijek versus pole, and so on and so forth. That comes from the student's point of view. Is it important for him? Does he respect the teachers? I always say that, you know, that I mean, I started with my Sifu back in '75, and if it wasn't for him, I will not be doing what I am today, regardless what I learned. Regardless, my Sifu actually once said to me, try to learn from my father, let my father teach you, because he knows a lot. But I just love to do, because in the olden days, he just loved to do Chai Sau Doi Zhong Duk Set One. He only liked to do it. He used to go on the roof and just do that all the time. And in his early days, he was such a powerful person for the small person he was. So lineage is important in that sense, that through your respect as well. Obviously, so too many people learn. And then when there's an old saying, you cross the boat or you cross the bridge, then you say, I've burned the bridge now because. But I always remember my Sifu teaching me the steps back in whatever, and if I didn't start that journey then I cannot be here today, wherever I am. How far I get, how famous, how non-famous, it doesn't matter. But that was the first step. No, this is an ongoing debate, isn't it? You know, I don't think it matters, but everything comes from Chow Gar. All I know is that when I went to the grave in the early days, there was Chow Gar Tong Long on it. That was in the early time, 1980, 81. I was there. So Ding Gong Chow Gar Tong Long. And then some time later, around about 10, 12 years later, it was just Lau Soi. And now today is Chow Gar back again. So whoever's changing the grave has wasted his money, you know. I don't know why they do it. Okay, Chow Gar, Dong Gong Chow Gar, Ju Gar. Actually, Chow Gar in Chow Gar is pronounced Ju, but the character is the same. So if a Chow Gar person, he would say Dong Gong, Ju Gar Tong Long, Ju. But actually, the character is still in Cantonese still the same. But the character for Ju Gar, as we know, Ju Gar Gao, is different, you know. But there's an ongoing debate. I don't think it's important. No, because Ju means royal. Okay, but it's a different character. But Jiao, the character for Jiao, you know, the one with the little box at the bottom, is pronounced Ju in Chow Gar. But Lau Soi said, according to the Grand Master, he said adamant is Jiao. But does it matter? No? Yeah, there's the hard Hei Gong for, you know, the palms and all that, and then there's a lot of hitting Gao Chois. That's the beginning of it. Then later you can use the bags. That's part of it as well. Yeah, that's and obviously all the different types of medicine you put on your hands. Yeah, so if you like to do that and spend time doing it, you know, certainly, I mean, obviously it does make you tougher. So if you do hit, because most people, you know, like if you like West boxers, you know, they take the gloves off because they're always holding their hands like this in the glove. When they take the gloves off and they punch, sometimes they break their knuckles. So it's important that we strengthen up our fingers and our knuckles so that doesn't happen. So we need some form of conditioning, even at a basic level. So using iron palm training is tantamount, has a reason for it. Why? Because do you know, like when you hit, say for instance, I hit you really hard, bang, it leaves a print. And then, but the red print comes up with all little spots, you know, like little blood, you know. So red, you know, blood, sand, palm. So it comes up. Hut sa germ, hut, blood, sa, sand, germ. So it leaves a red print. So it's called hut sa germ, blood, sand, palm. I used to practice quite a lot many years ago. I haven't done it so much for a long time, but you can spend a lot of time thinking too much about it, and so much so that you never get any of your techniques done. You know, you go, oh, I palm here, but actually you have to do it in your training. So if you're practicing again like your forms, you actually think that you're hitting targets. So that's very important. So even at a basic level, you know, hitting the temple, the throat, the ribs, they're all dim yut points or dim muk points. But so you have to visualize it anyway. And these techniques can work in various different situations, as I have discovered over the years, you know. So it's not just about hitting that you use them, you can also use them when you're grappling. Actually, I mean, you learn Bo Sim Sau, but actually everything will come Bo Sim. You know, it's like it's like you highlight something. It's like later on, say, give an example, we're doing Saam Bo Jin, yeah? But then later on you learn Dip Gua Gong, and you close. But then you realise when you go back to the first one, oh, same. So it's the same when you do Bo Sim. You learn the technique, and you learn to hit the points, and you're aiming for those points. But then later on you go back to a basic form, you can also do the same there. It's no different. It just means it's highlighted further up. And because it's highlighted, it brings you back to the beginning again and say, redo it again. Because that's what it's like. You keep on going back to your basics. And as you improve, then you see more. It's like, an example is like, if you think the same way you did, say, 20 years ago, you haven't improved. They give you reflexes. And to make an appropriate action to a particular possible attack. That's as far as it goes, in the sense that it develops that. Obviously it's not fighting, but it's a game that you play in order to make sure that you're doing the appropriate movement for a particular attack. So that's the idea of the sensitivity exercise. 7 is just a basic number, actually 8, it should be 8 exercises, but actually it increases with every technique you can practice on throughout the whole system. But it helps you just to stimulate your reaction. So if, like, for instance, if you're doing sensitivity exercise and I decide to kick you and you went down to block, you know, that will be wrong. So you learn to lift up your leg. And over a period of time you get used to it. So when you do it in sparring or do it some kind of contact, then obviously you should be able to lift your leg up to block. You know, so yeah, the legs block the legs and the hands block the hands. Although it's not strictly 100% like that, but you know, if someone kicks you with the groin, you should block with your legs, not with your hands. Yeah, like soft breathing, you can do breathing exercise to make you sense of well-being. That's an important thing. Reverse breathing is when you, so as I breathe in, I imagine the in-breath coming out with the out-breath, and the out-breath I imagine coming with the in-breath. When you combine this breathing together, yeah, you will enter into the state of equilibrium, balance, the mind, everything is to do with your breath. So that's part of that. Regarding like when you train in other exercises, like when you're doing first form, you might breathe out, you might keep a little bit of breath in, because if you don't, you might get winded. So there's that. But overall, if you're fit and you're healthy, then obviously that's okay. As I say, whichever you like to take the martial art, whichever point you like to take. Say for instance, if you might go to another Chow Gar school and the Sifu might like to do weapons training. So for him, the jewel of the system will be his weapons. And likewise, someone likes to do all these gongs, the jewel of his system will be all these gongs. Other people just like to do conditioning exercises, that will be his take on it. It's the same system, maybe a different flavour, but generally speaking it's the same. So I would say that if someone likes to do Chow Gar and he likes to spar, because the techniques are good for sparring, okay, then he takes that side to it. San Sau, San means free or bright or part hands. Not San of free, not Saam, it's San, free as in free. And what it means is that when you learn a form, it might contain 20 movements or something, 18, I don't know. And what you do, you take out 3 or 4 techniques and you practice them. That's San Sau, that becomes San Sau. So what happens is that you have 36 San Sau, yeah? And the 36 San Sau teaches you where you should have your hands and so on and so forth. And eventually you should be able to do any combinations in fighting from them. So in other words, like it's like when you learn, you've got your set sentences, like in learning your language, yeah? You have your vocabulary, blah, blah, blah. And then you have your sentences that you gets you by, hello, how are you, where am I going, that kind of thing. So forms are like that, and the San Sau is your, you know, isolated names or, you know, or words. And what happens is that you break down the form and you learn to put them in different angles, different ideas, same concept, just you could have hundreds of combinations. So you might have 10 techniques, but you've got hundreds of combinations, hundreds. That's the idea of San Sau, and that's why it was called bright hands or free hand. That's what it means. So it teaches you a lot. So if 10 people in a class, they all know their San Sau very good, so you should be able to go, okay, we're going to do Bao Zhong Gao Choi Sok Sau. Okay, go, and they all do it. Yeah, and then you should be able to do, okay, now we're going to do this one and then that one. And if they're all competent in their San Sau, they should be able to adjust very quickly to it, and therefore the training becomes lively. You know, it's not just, you're not following a routine. If you just follow a routine, eventually that routine becomes just another routine and a routine, and you just keep on following that routine. Yeah, and then eventually you don't think anymore. You shouldn't be like that. It should be that you're always aware of what you're doing. It's a gradual thing from the very early days. Watching Grand Master, watching how he makes his medicine, which herbs, which pill does what, which, you know, it was a gradual development over the years. You have loads of formulas and loads of different types of medicine. And the problem is today is it's written by Lau Soi, and a lot of the words are old Chinese, you know, different characters. You know? Even some of the Chinese having difficulty now to find out which herb is this. So imagine for me. Because you need to manipulate, if someone's got a problem with their joint, you need to manipulate it in some way. So different techniques of stretching, releasing the joints. Grand Master's nickname was Slippery Pip. It's because every time someone grabbed, he could overcome it. You know, even when I sparred him when he was around about, I don't know how old was he then. He was maybe 90 or something. He was still fast. I mean, obviously, we're not going hammer and tongs, but the thing is that we were even that age. So imagine when he was younger, when he was in his 40s or 50s. Yeah, to persevere, you know. I don't think it's an easy ride for sort of kind of like training. It's one that you've got to devote your whole life to, and on the way you're going to meet, you know, different obstacles that are going to put you back, but those setbacks are not really setbacks, they're strengthening processes. Actually, I'm happy when I see students do really well. because I say to people, like, you know, that I like everyone to do really well, because, you know, if you've been learning the martial art for a long time, you want them to be competent, you know, and I'm happy to see that, because, you know, regardless what they do in their life, you know, where they're getting, it's great to see them improve, and you know, obviously that's important for me, you know? And having their own schools and developing, and I like to see that. And passing on the system. Well, because I always think that I'm not that good, so I just got to continuously keep on training, and, you know, develop which I need to develop, you know, for sure. So, you know, you try to keep mastering, keep on doing, you know. So for me, that's important. But yeah, and I like to keep, you know, thinking that I can develop more and more.